my name is Willemijn Appels. I am the Mueller Applied Research Chair in Irrigation Science here at the college. And I work with soils and plants and water. And here in this space, we created this sort of indoor project with Southern Irrigation to have a better look, an all-year look at how we can optimize management, water management for field crops with subsurface drip. And I will talk you through what we're actually doing in these boxes and what works and what doesn't work. But first, Kees van Beek will tell you all about drip irrigation in general and southern irrigation in particular.
Right on. Well, thank you, Willemijn. I don't know if all these things work. One is for the camera. Yeah, sounds good. Everybody can hear me without yelling too hard. So I would like to, I will go a little bit closer to our PowerPoint. It's just a short PowerPoint, gives us a little bit of an overview on what drip is, where it's from, how is it developed, and later we'll talk a little bit where we think it will go in the future. So yeah, I'm from Southern Irrigation. Southern Irrigation works with Netafim, who is our supplier of all the drip products for 30 years. And Netafim is one of the companies, or is the company actually, that started with drip at the beginning. So I give you just a little bit of history, it's just some fun facts, let's call them. So in 1967, Netafim came out with the very first dripper in the world. There were some Germans in 1920 and 1930, they play a little bit with water in a clay pot and let it drip out. But the official dripper was in 1967. And basically they started to use it in the kibbutz and in their areas. But they developed quite fast, so 1970 you get a total different, I'm not going to go into details, but because we can go really in depth in those drippers, it's a big story to it. But they developed a new dripper, and in 1978 we get the first PC, pressure compensating dripper. And over the years that kept developed in better drippers, but mostly more lower flow dripper. It's all about efficiency in moving water through a thin line really far with a low flow emitter and give the soil time to spread out. And from there, in 1989, the first Typhoon integral dripper, what they use for different kind of crop sheds. The dripper PC came in 2003, and I think I missed one. Yes, I did miss one. They also came out with the dripper PC, pressure compensated dripper, for the greenhouses and for the landscape. So Netafim is a company, started with the drip, and that's still what they do today. Today you have, of course, a lot more drip irrigation companies that supplies, but we really like to work with this particular company pure because that's their bread and butter, that's what they research, that's what they study, that's what they breed, and they got quite far over the years. So that was just a little bit of a history. So we talk about here subsurface drip irrigation. I make the mistake to always call it SDI, but of course it's still very new for our prairies here. But subsurface drip irrigation means only that we have the drip irrigation below the surface, and we try to give the right amount of water that the soil can handle, so the moisture travels, and have therefore a very efficient dripping or irrigation method. And we'll go over in a few details on it and some benefits. Very generally how that looks like, so they can look on a 40 acre like this, and they can look on a 160 acre like this, or 200 acres, or whatever size field. But we have a supply line, an X amount, and from the supply line we have drip lines that average goes 8 to 16 inches deep. We like to go shallow, if possible, with deep ripping. Sometimes you have to go a little bit further spacing so we can deep rip in between. There is a lot of different ways of doing it, but it all looks a little bit the same. And so it's a main line that feeds all these drip lines. 40 inch spacing, 36 inch, a little bit further yet, all the way to the end, and then we have a flush line. And everything is electronics controlled. We have the valve set for each zones, we have drain pits, and but there's quite a bit of design going into each system. You have to know a lot of facts, and you have to know all your soils, etc., etc. And one of the reasons that we like to continue to learn is why we're here for, and we have worked with the college on these research plots. So why drip irrigation? There's just a few pictures here that we took in the projects here in Alberta. But first of all, it's 96% efficient. That number only changes if we don't know how to irrigate with drip. Like irrigating with drip is a total different ballgame than with overhead irrigation. Either it's a wheel line, a hand move, or a pivot, low pressure, high pressure. It's a total different thing that we still sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times fine-tuning and learning about. Because it's all to do what kind of soil we have and what kind of spacing and flow. And I don't know why this goes automatic. I didn't think I had it on. So excuse me. And now it doesn't do nothing anymore. Just let's sing a song. This is Ben. He's our agronomist, and he is also very smart with that. That's good. 2 up. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, we go one further. So 90% efficient, that's a huge number, and that's a constant number. If we don't know how to irrigate, we irrigate totally wrongly, we have some seepage going down, then it's not 96% efficient anymore. But if we know how to irrigate, this is at all times 96% efficient. Whatever the weather is, whatever the ET is, well, the ET has nothing to do with it, the plant stage is, we can at all times irrigate with a 96% efficiency. And that has huge benefits, and I go back again. So that's one, no runoff, because we apply what the soil can handle. Less soil compaction, so your organic matters, everything has a big benefit on. Therefore, we can have increased yields, fewer foliar diseases. We don't wet our crop, we don't have lodging or less. We all still have, of course, our weather. And it's a very efficient way of applying fertilizers. And we can cover all these shapes. So there's a lot of benefits, and I still miss a whole bunch on here. And I go fast due to the time. So besides all the benefits on irrigating efficient, the biggest benefit from SDI to really boost the yield potential is fertigating through the drip. We can find small windows of 2-3 days, and we have to apply a little bit of nitrogen or a little bit of phosphorus or any other kind of a fertilizer that is possible with drip. We can actually apply it instant to the root zone, and therefore we can really get deeper and deeper into science and shorter windows what the plants need, a little bit comparable to what we do in the greenhouses. Let me see once more. So we don't know exactly what our yields is, and especially not here with all the different crops and all the different soils. So what is my true yield potential? With drip, we eventually can figure it out in the most efficient way. How much fertilizer should I use and when should I place it? Because we can work with shorter windows. So the nutrication to the drip, it's applied directly to the root zone, and also applied when the plant needs it and within the short windows. And if it blows 80 kilometers an hour and we want to give a little bit of fertilizer, but through overhead irrigation in general, there is variables. With drip, if we understand it, there are no variables. We have way more control on our destiny for our yield potentials. So yeah, this is just a picture of a drip field. I think it's by Gem in the area. And then here you see a little bit of a soil moisture sensor. We started out a lot of manual testing and all that, and we learned last year with the dry season that we always were a little bit behind the ball game. We had to step it up. So now we use soil moisture sensors. We have live data of how the water moves. It's controlled by the farmer on the phone, the backup from Southern Irrigation on the phone, and even the company looks at all the data as well, all to be that we can react faster. That if we see it's getting a little bit dry, now we do this, now we do this, it's 2 days later and we do what we need to do, now we can do it instant.
Okay, where do you put your sensor? Right on the drip line or in between the drip lines?
No, Ben probably can answer, it has a certain spacing. Okay. Also a little bit soil dependent. Yeah, so the question was, where do we place the soil moisture sensor? Is that right on the drip line? Ben can handle it all in details, but it has a certain spacing from the drip, from the lateral, partly also maybe to its soil, what kind of soils, but it is a really set point, and it comes really precise to get the accurate meetings. It does measure every 4 inches, it gives signals every 3 minutes, and then it collects it every 15 minutes or whatever it is.
It depends on what kind of crop you're growing, because you want your probe to be positioned near your crop row and also not directly on the drip line. So you position it essentially kind of between the crop row and the nearest drip line, or whatever, and then between 2 emitters on the drip line. You do not want it right on the drip line. You want it close to your crop row so you can actually measure, you're monitoring the moisture in your root zone rather than just moisture on the drip line.
Thank you. Yeah, you bet. Again, after this, there's questions. We have several people here. Well, of course, Willemijn, other people from the college, and then Ben, there's Frank, and so there's a lot of people can answer questions, including myself. Another part of drip, we don't do the research here, but the funny part is, and that's why I show this slide, when Willemijn from the college came, she wanted to do research on, we call it precision mobile drip irrigation. It's what we do from pivots. And even though we would love to do it, we said, well, actually, we like to do some research here locally on all the different soils in this area on SDI. So we kind of changed it. In the future, we hope to still do that, probably more in the field. But yeah, so we say always join the drip revolutions. Drip irrigation in general, it's an awesome method, but there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of fine tuning. And for the farmers that go into drip, there is quite a learning curve and quite a general understanding what is it all about. It's again, for us too, and we get a lot of support from NetFM and from people in the States, because drip has been out for many years, hugely, of course, in the US, hugely in India, and there is a lot of knowledge available, but every area has their own particular things, and so all the possibilities are with drip. I believe that in a benefit over overhead irrigation in generally. However, you have to be ready for a big learning curve, and you won't have more time per se, because you will at the beginning learn and learn and learn. So that's what my little talk on the drip irrigation. Sorry for the speed that I do it with, and I'd like to give the microphones back to Willemijn. There. Yeah.
So you have to replace this every 25 years, right? But do you have to replace the whole thing, or just the...
If I can all ask you to move a little bit closer, because now we're going to see where the actual action is. So we built these 3 boxes so large because we really wanted to be able to show what the plant does with this water through the subsurface drip system in a situation that resembles the field. So instead of putting it just in a bucket or in a 1 by 1 square or cubic meter box, we figured out that we need a full 90 centimeter soil profile and enough space between the lines and along the lines that you'd be able to recreate a wetting front that resembles what you would find in the field around a dripper and around a line. So each box here has a little over 16 cubic meters of soil. This is a loam soil from Lomond. Doug and his family can take credit for this one. Then over there we have soil from Ken Coles. You all know him, and we won't talk about that soil any further. And then there's a more sandy profile from the Grassy Lake area over there. So we layered that in, 10 centimeter increments. We wetted it up a little bit, mixed in some moisture, then packed it in with a walk behind to get a bulk density and a sort of a penetration depth that we'd measured in the field before. And then we put in 4 subsurface drip systems. So you see here in the plastic, you see these wide lines. Those are the main lines. So they're the actual drip lines run along the short end, and they are positioned just a little higher than these white plastic lines. So there's 2 systems at 20 centimeters depth and 2 systems at 30 centimeters depth. And at each depth, we have one system that has a 24-inch emitter spacing and one system that has a 30-inch emitter spacing. So we can vary the system that we switch on, that we activate, and that we water with. And we can even, in the beginning, we switched between each of those systems so that we could get a nice uniform wetting up of the entire box. Now, the idea with all of this drip irrigation is that you get water into the root zone, but then you don't let it all drip out of the root zone immediately. It really has to stay there. So you try to make moisture move sideways and move it up. And that works based on not just the particle size distribution of your soil, but mostly on the pore size distribution. So small pores hold on to water more strongly than large pores. In large pores, when you have those full of water, water tends to move with gravity, just going down. Whereas the small pores, capillary action will keep that water in place and makes a diffusion moment. So that water, instead of just moving down, if all the water in the soil is stored in the small pores, it'll move in a bulb. Depending on your pore size distribution, so the amount of small versus the amount of large pores, will determine whether that pattern is nice and round or whether it's more elliptical and has a bigger influence of gravity. So in the sand, you'd see an ellipse with a fair amount of water still moving down, even though it'd be slow, but it's moving down more than it'll move sideways. Whereas in this loam, you can see it almost in a perfect circle. What you also see, this is a fairly light soil. So here you see a bit of a gradient. This is dry, this is wet, and this is actually two moisture fronts from two different emitters that have found each other and wetted that up all the way. So these are the effects of two systems at 50 centimeters distance. But after that, we did that treatment way back in March. And at the moment, we're only running the 24/8 system, so a 24-inch spacer at 20 centimeters depth. And they sustain that moisture at a meter spacing. So there's the distance between the lines that supply water at the moment is 1 meter.
On this?
On this one, yeah.
And you can see they actually rise that much on this loam.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they sustain that moisture in that band. And if you look even closer, you see that here at the bottom, this is light again. Mm-hmm. So the water here is fairly much retained around the area where you put it into the soil. Mm-hmm. In that box, it's way different. Like there you have a traditional profile which is dry at the top and then wets up through the bottom. The clay over there is just really variable. So you'll see if you take a look at it, you'll see big cracks in the surface because the surface dries out so much and so fast, especially when the fans are on in here. It just, yeah, dries out very, very quickly. And then because you lose the connection between the soil particles and all of a sudden you create macropores instead of tiny pores, that water cannot move either. Oh, question.
I'm just curious if you have any idea what the denitrification losses would be like in this system, especially if you're keeping it saturated all the time and then there's cracking at the surface. Would those losses be higher?
If you keep it saturated, then yes, you might get into trouble with that. But the whole point of this is that you don't saturate your soil. You really keep it at a level, just at that unsaturated point where your K is not breaking through, like if you have the K curve as a function of moisture content, it'll have this transition point where you go from really small permeability values all of a sudden to very high permeability values. If you can keep your soil moisture content right below that point, then denitrification should not be that much because your soil is still relatively dry. Yes?
Would that be what, 2/3 field capacity approximately?
That might be, but it also differs very much between soils. Oh, so that would be an interesting thing to test, and this could be the facility to do that, yeah.
But compared to, sorry.
No, go ahead.
But compared to regular irrigation with a pivot, at least now you're letting it dry out more. You're not saturating your soil as often, on where with a normal pivot you might be tending to over-irrigate more often, causing more leaching.
Yeah, you really have to pay attention that you don't over-irrigate with this system. Mm-hmm. The trouble is that you can't see if you're doing that. Because the top might still be dry. And if you're, especially if you have a deeper system, if you're irrigating at this depth, then you might already be losing water or having a saturated layer deeper in your profile without you being aware from just scouting the top that you're at that saturation level deep down. So yeah, monitoring moisture becomes much more of an issue and is way more important in these systems. So we have 14 or 15 sensors in a vertical profile, and then another 10, 12, depending a little bit on the box, in a horizontal profile. So we can really see that water move when we apply it through one of those lines. Yes?
Yeah, so my question was, how do you take into account an actual soil profile? Because most of our soils in Western Canada have, what, 2 or 3 inches of, a horizon?
Yeah.
Whereas what I'm seeing here is a lot more.
A horizon, yes. Yeah, I mean, this is all soil that was mixed from 0 to 40, 50 centimeters is what we picked it up from, and then we just mixed it and put it in. That's true. I think the packing at every 10 centimeters has created some, interesting compaction type of profiles, but this is why we do combine it with field investigation. So we've got sensors in Kent's field, Doug's field as well, where they have the SDI systems. So we're trying to make a bit of that comparison. Like SDI is really well understood in terms of water movement from an idealized perspective. Like there's so many models that have been used to investigate the flow around that one emitter, and then in a variety of settings of texture differences, of layers, more dense on top, more dense below, etc. But the real question is, how much of that do you need to know of in the field in order to translate it into a good management decision? So that's one of the goals of this whole exercise here, I would say. I haven't looked at this side too much. Any questions? We're still, I'm waiting for a bunch of stronger lights to arrive so that we can actually pump up the plant water uptake a little bit, because only when we have a good daily removal of water can we actually test various applications schedules. I mean, now if we put in 5 millimeters of water, that might per day, that'll lead to drainage from the bottom simply because the plants don't take up that much water yet. So hopefully those lights will arrive soon and we can increase that volume a little bit and get to more scenarios.
Might you see reduced root depth? Like once their plant goes down and finds that moisture at the emitters,
Good question.
Could it kind of, instead of branching out and searching for moisture, which
there is some evidence that they would that there are higher root densities around the emitters.
Yeah.
But because you apply water usually not that frequently, they will search around. But yeah, that'll be one of the things.
Uptake, right?
You
almost need to put down micronutrients with your water to account for that reduced.
I don't think it's one of the main findings so far. There might be a higher density, but the plant will still root its full length most of the time. But yeah. Ask one of the guys in the blue shirts. They'll be able to give you a better answer to that than me. Okay.
How would you manage, like let's say you're after seeding a small seeded crop, how would you manage to try to get the moisture to the top?
You'd probably want to make sure that you irrigate before you seed,
okay,
so that you're not trying to push in a lot of water in a very dry soil, but that you're actually seeding into a soil that's already moist, and then apply regular small applications to make sure that you get in as much moisture as you can at a rate that is as low as possible.
Okay.
But it won't necessarily work in all soil types yet, and you might want to take the line spacing and the emitter spacing into account if you consider that. Yeah. 5 minutes. Okay. Well, I think I've said most of the things that I would like to say. So if there are any questions, just let me know. We have a tiny system over there. Oh yeah. So this is an animation of some of the observations from the 3 boxes. So it's a vertical profile. Around the 4 lines, we have a whole network of sensors, soil moisture sensors, that measure the volumetric water content. This is in the sand, this is in the loam, and that's in the clay soil. And the clay soil has a different axis because it's generally wetter than the other 2. So what you can, it's taken on a day that we watered through the 24/8 system, so the shallow system with the 24-inch emitter spacing. And what you see in the sandy soil is that it mostly affects the reading of the sensor straight under it. So you sort of see that ellipse moving down, and this is only a 1.5-hour application, and it doesn't really respond in that upper sensor. So it's a very, very small application in a relatively dry sand, and most of that water keeps on moving down. And you'll see that this is at 20 centimeters above the bottom of the box. That's where it's a bit wetter than right on the top. So there's a straight moisture gradient in that sandbox. In the loam, you'll see that the water is really pulsing here. The start of the pulse is at, it was ended 5 hours before sort of the current observations. So you'll see that you get a response in this emitter, in this sensor, and also in that sensor. So in the loam, a lot of that water also moves sideways. And it moves sideways in such a way that even in a small application, you can see that response in the sensors that surround the set of the lines. And in the clay, this is currently at a 40 to 45% moisture. You'll see some dynamics. This one starts at, I think, 10. But it's very much all over the place. What we see at the moment is because in the clay there is no crop that takes up the water, and in these it's very small, that the residual effects are really large. So when you apply water through one of those emitters, it doesn't travel that far, but it also doesn't get taken up. So you see patches of water sort of hanging out at their equilibrium point. But yeah, we're collecting a lot of this information, and that'll become much more interesting once you have this stronger water uptake, so that we can run experiments with larger applications and more regularly, more frequent, because we draw down the water content as well. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about the cost of this system compared with
the guys in the blue shirts know all about that. I don't so much.
Because actually, regarding water efficiency, it sounds very good for saving water, cost of water. It's very a big advantage of this model. However, about the cost of that, implicating this model, how is it compared with the rain?
I think the manufacturer would say that you can boost yield because you can put your water and your nutrients straight into the root zone. Yeah. So if you're looking to increase productivity on a field where you would have to replace your irrigation system, this might become a cost-effective option. But it's more expensive than a typical sprayer. Yeah. Did I do you justice? Good.
How about pressure to run the system? What kind of pressure does it take?
This one is very low, but yeah, for a normal field, for what would the pressure be for a
quarter section?
15 to 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, and.
In generally, worldwide, where drip started is because there is a water shortage and they cannot grow an optimal crop with the amount of water they are allowed to use. So they had to do it with way less water use SDI, and what we see on those fields is that in time, when they understand the drip, there's huge yield potential, and it's definitely a world saver, so to speak, because in the Middle East, in many countries, they simply don't have 18 inches or 16 inches, they have to do it with 8 or 10 max. And there is where drip comes in. We don't have that problem here, or not on a large scale. So we actually are a step ahead. So for the ETA on cost, in certain fields it is a tough one. So on every field we install, we do an ETA. or an ETA, come on now. ROI, sorry, yes. So we calculate that thoroughly through, and for some fields it is a very tough one. On some fields, even if it's 160 acres and it's all perfect for both drip and wheel line, pivot and drip, it's amazing how good the ROI can set. But that's different for every application. What the end picture is utilizing the water and the resources we have as efficient as possible for the highest as possible system. And that's the journey we're on. And again, if you want to join in, welcome to the Drip Revolution. Thank you.